American couple files from Reddit episode 30. My fiance's best friend warned me not to marry him and then showed me the group chat. I remember the exact moment my world tilted sideways. It was a Tuesday night and I was lying in bed next to George, scrolling through Instagram when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. He was already asleep, snoring softly, and I glanced at the screen out of habit. The message preview read, "Bro, you better not actually go through with it. You know what she did to David's marriage?" I froze. The message was from his best friend Marcus. I didn't recognize the context, but the words settled into my chest like a stone. Who was she? David was my older brother. And what marriage? David had been married to Ella for 4 years, and as far as I knew, they were fine, perfect, even. They posted matching pumpkin patch photos every October and hosted Christmas Eve dinner every year like a Hallmark ad. I didn't confront George that night. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Marcus must have been talking about someone else, that my brain was just tired from work. But the next morning when George was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I picked up his phone and unlocked it. His passcode was our anniversary. I knew it because he'd told me once when I asked him to change the Spotify playlist during a road trip. The group chat was called The Old Crew and it had 5 people in it. George, Marcus, 2 other guys I'd met at barbecues, and one woman whose name I didn't recognize. I scrolled up, heart hammering, and started reading. And the more I read, the harder it got to breathe. It turns out that 4 years before I met George, he had briefly dated a woman named Ella. For 6 months, they were a thing. She wanted marriage and kids. He was deep into partying, doing drugs, being unreliable. He wasn't ready and she couldn't make him settle down. So she ended it, and within a month, she met my brother David at a mutual friend's bonfire. They got married 6 or 7 months later. So in just over a year, Ella went from dating George to marrying my brother. I didn't know any of that when George and I started dating 2 years ago. George had never mentioned her name. David never brought it up either. And Ella. When I first met her at a family dinner, she was warm and sweet, hugging me and calling me little sis. She helped me pick out a dress for my cousin's wedding. She seemed like the perfect sister-in-law, until she found out I was dating George. The first sign something was wrong came 3 months into our relationship. George had just bought me a necklace for my birthday, a simple gold chain with a tiny star charm, and I wore it to a Sunday brunch at David and Ella's house. Ella saw it and her smile flickered just for a second like a candle catching a draft. Then she laughed and said, "Oh, George always had good taste in jewelry. He bought me something similar once." I thought it was an awkward slip. David didn't react, but after that brunch, the texts started. Ella began sending me long voice memos at 2 in the morning. She'd spin stories about George's past, how he'd once shown up drunk to a work event, how he'd borrowed money from friends and never paid it back, how he'd apparently groomed a 19-year-old when he was 30. That last one was a lie. I checked with Marcus later, who confirmed the girl was 23 and they'd only gone on 2 dates. But Ella told everyone who would listen. She told my parents that George was abusing me. She told David that George was trying to turn me into an addict like he used to be. She called my aunt and said I was being brainwashed. At first, I thought she was just being protective. Maybe she felt guilty about her own history with him and wanted to warn me. But the accusations got darker. She claimed George was isolating me from my family. She said he was controlling my finances. None of it was true. George went to therapy 3 times a week. He had been sober for 18 months by then. He had a steady job as a project manager, a savings account, and a cat named Beans that he loved more than anything. The breaking point came when George proposed. He took me to the botanical gardens where we'd had our first date, got down on one knee in front of the rose arbors, and asked me to marry him. I said yes. We went back to his apartment and called my parents first. My mom cried. My dad said, "If you're happy, we're happy." Then George called his mom and everything was fine. The next day, I posted a photo of the ring on Instagram. Ella liked it within 30 seconds. An hour later, my brother David called me, his voice tight. "Ella says you need to pump the brakes on this wedding thing," he said. I asked why. "She says George is still using. She says she saw him at a bar last week buying coke from some guy in the bathroom." My heart stopped. George had been with me last week. We watched a documentary about penguins and ordered Thai food. He didn't leave the apartment. I told David that. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She also told me that you've been acting weird, that you seem stressed and tired all the time, that maybe you're in over your head." I felt my face get hot. "David, I'm not stressed. I'm happy. I'm planning a wedding. That's exhausting, but it's good exhaustion." He sighed. "I don't know, man. She's my wife. I have to trust her." That was when I started paying attention to the group chat, because if Ella was lying about George being a coke dealer, what else was she lying about? And what was George's best friend warning him about? I read through the messages from the past 6 months. Marcus had been trying to convince George to leave me. He said things like, "You're making a huge mistake." Ella told me everything. Another friend chimed in, "Dude, her whole family is crazy, run." Then the woman I didn't recognize wrote, "I saw her at the mall last week and she was flirting with some guy at the food court. If she's cheating on you now, imagine when you're married." I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I put the phone back on the nightstand, walked into the living room and sat on the couch. George came out of the shower 10 minutes later, towel around his waist, and saw my face. "What's wrong?" He asked. I looked at him, this man who had changed his entire life for me, who went to therapy and apologized when he messed up and made me laugh until I snorted, and I said, "Your friends think I'm a liar." He didn't deny it. He sat down next to me, put his hand on my knee and said, "I know, I've been trying to handle it on my own. I didn't want to worry you." And then he told me the rest, about how Marcus was actually Ella's cousin. About how Ella had been feeding Marcus stories about me for over a year, claiming that I had tried to break up her marriage before she even married David, claiming that I was jealous of her and David, and that I had a history of going after her exes. She had convinced Marcus that I was a manipulative homewrecker and Marcus had been trying to save George from me. The woman in the group chat, that was Ella's best friend from college. She had never even met me. She just believed everything Ella said. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. George shrugged. "I thought if I just kept being a good partner, eventually everyone would see the truth." Stupid, right? I didn't say anything. I just sat there feeling the weight of all those messages, all those accusations, all those lies stitched together so carefully that even the people who loved George believed them. And then I thought about Ella, sitting in her perfect little house with my brother, smiling at family dinners, knowing exactly what she was doing. The wedding is in 4 months. David is still my brother, but he hasn't spoken to me since I told him about the group chat. He said I was being dramatic, that Ella would never do something like that, that maybe I was just stressed from wedding planning. My parents are caught in the middle. George's mom wants me to just block everyone and elope, but I can't shake the feeling that the worst is yet to come. Because if Ella will lie to destroy my relationship, what will she do when she realizes I know the truth? That's how I ended up here, typing this out at 3 in the morning, 3 weeks after Marcus's warning message. I thought I was overreacting. I thought maybe I was just paranoid. But then Marcus showed me the rest of the chat, the part where Ella herself was in the group. Oh yeah, she was there the whole time, under a fake name. And she was the one sending most of the messages. I stared at my phone screen, reading the messages under the fake name. The profile picture was a generic sunset. The name was Jenny 989. But the writing style was unmistakable, the same dramatic ellipses, the same overuse of emojis, the same phrases she used in her voice memos. He deserves someone who isn't going to drag him down. She's clearly just using him for his money. He's older, stable, she's young, and wants a free ride. I have it on good authority she cheated on her last boyfriend. All lies, all from Ella. I didn't confront her that night. I was too stunned. George sat next to me on the couch, his hand still on my knee, and we just sat in silence for a long time. Then I said, "We need to tell my brother." George shook his head. "He won't believe you. He'll say you're making it up or that I manipulated you into thinking this. I have screenshots. She'll say you faked them or that your friend hacked her account. She's been doing this for years, apparently. Marcus told me she did the same thing to her ex before me, spread rumors that he was abusive, got his friends to turn on him. It's what she does." I thought about that. About how fast she married David, about how she seemed to have molded herself into the perfect wife. About the way David looked at her like she hung the moon. I had seen them argue once at a family barbecue over a burnt steak, and within minutes she had him apologizing and rubbing her shoulders. She controlled him without him even knowing it. The next morning, I called David and asked him to meet me for coffee. No Ella, just us. We met at a diner near his work, the same one we used to go to as kids for pancakes. He ordered black coffee, I ordered tea. He looked tired. "What's this about?" he asked. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots, the group chat. The messages from Jenny 989, the timestamps, the lies, the accusations. He scrolled through them slowly, his face going pale. "This is Ella's writing," I said. "You know it is. She uses the same phrases. She signs off with the same kissy emoji she uses in texts to mom." He put the phone down. "I don't know what to say. Say you believe me." He looked at me and I saw the war in his eyes, the brother who grew up with me, who protected me from bullies, who taught me how to drive stick shift. And the husband who had been married to this woman for 2 years, who had built a life with her, who probably couldn't imagine that she was capable of this. "I need to talk to her," he said finally. "Don't tell her I showed you this, not yet, just ask her about the group chat, see what she says." He agreed. I hugged him goodbye and went home. For 3 days I heard nothing. George and I kept planning the wedding, but there was a shadow over everything. I checked my phone obsessively, nothing from David. On the 4th day, David called me at 7 a.m. His voice was hoarse. "She admitted it." I sat up in bed. "What?" I confronted her. I said, "I found a group chat where she was spreading lies about you." She broke down crying and said she was jealous, that she couldn't stand seeing George happy with someone else after he rejected her, that she wanted to ruin your relationship so you would break up and she could feel better about herself. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "What did you say?" I told her she needed to apologize to you, to George, to everyone she lied to. She said she would, but then she got mad and said I was choosing you over her, that I didn't love her. She packed a bag and left to stay with her sister. I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that David finally knew the truth. Dread because I knew Ella wouldn't just disappear, she would fight back. And she did. Within a week, I started getting calls from my aunt, my uncle, my cousins. Ella had called them all, crying, saying that I was trying to break up her marriage, that I had fabricated evidence, that David was being manipulated by George. She said I was a liar and a homewrecker. She said George was still using drugs and that I was covering for him. She said that if David divorced her, it would be my fault. My parents called me. Mom was crying. We don't know who to believe, she said. Ella was like a daughter to us, but you're our daughter. We're stuck in the middle. She's lying, Mom. I have proof. She says you doctored the screenshots. I wanted to scream. Why would I do that? Why would I spend months planning this elaborate scheme against her? She's the one who started this. My dad got on the phone. We're not taking sides. We just want everyone to calm down and talk this out. But you can't talk out something like this. Not when one person is willing to burn everything down just to feel like she won. The final blow came 2 weeks later. David called me and said he had asked Ella to come back home, but only if she agreed to go to marriage counseling with him. She agreed, but then she showed up at the house with a police officer. She claimed that George had been sending her threatening text messages. She showed the officer screenshots of texts that said things like, "Stay away from my fiance or I'll make you regret it, and you're lucky I don't come over there right now." The number on the texts was George's, but George hadn't sent them. He showed me his phone, no outgoing messages to her. He had never texted her. She had created fake conversations using a spoofing app. The officer took a report. George was questioned. He had an alibi for every timestamp he was at work or with me or at his therapy session. The officer eventually dropped it, but the damage was done. My parents were horrified. My aunt called me to say she had always thought George was bad news. And David called me, his voice broken. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner." He filed for divorce that week. Ella went nuclear. She posted on Facebook that David had abandoned her because of his controlling, jealous sister. She told everyone at her church that I had ruined her marriage. She even showed up at my workplace one afternoon, stood in the lobby, and asked to speak to me. Security escorted her out. She left a voicemail saying, "You think you've won? You've just lost your brother, the best thing that ever happened to him. I hope you're happy." But here's the thing, David is happier now than he's been in years. He moved into a small apartment, started going to therapy, and reconnected with old friends. He came over for Thanksgiving and helped George carve the turkey. We laughed about the time we got stuck in a tree as kids. It felt like old times. Ella is banned from every family gathering. My parents finally saw through her when she tried to spread rumors about my mom having an affair. That was the last straw. They told her she was no longer welcome in our home. She hasn't spoken to anyone in the family since. George and I got married last spring. It was a small ceremony in the botanical gardens, the same one where he proposed. David walked me down the aisle. My mom cried. My dad gave a toast about forgiveness and family. And Marcus, he came up to me after the ceremony, hugged me and said, "I'm sorry I believed her. I should have known better." I forgave him, but I didn't forget, so no, I don't think I'm the asshole. I think I'm the one who finally told the truth. And sometimes the truth costs you a few people who were never really on your side anyway. I thought that story was over. I thought I had closed that chapter and moved on. But then a new story started, one that proved that some people will do anything to tear you down, even when you haven't done anything wrong. This one started at work. I have chronic pain. It's not something I talk about a lot because people either don't understand or think I'm making it up. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia when I was 22, after years of doctors telling me I was just stressed or that I needed to exercise more. The pain is like a constant low-grade fire in my joints, some days worse than others. On bad days, I use a cane. On really bad days, I use a walker. On good days, I can walk without any assistance and I look perfectly normal. That's the thing about invisible disabilities, you don't look sick, so people assume you're faking. I work as an assistant coordinator at a nonprofit. My boss, Amy, is wonderful. She knows about my condition and has always been accommodating. I have a disability placard for my car and I use it when I need to. I've never abused it. I only use handicapped parking on days when walking an extra 50 feet would leave me in tears by the time I reach my desk. Enter Casey. Casey is my coworker, same position, same title. She wants a promotion, the coordinator position that Amy is training for. Everyone knows it. Casey has been there longer than me and she thinks she deserves it more. She's been passive-aggressive for months, making comments about my lazy ass and saying things like, "Must be nice to get special treatment because you claim you're in pain." I ignored her. I tried to keep the peace. But then she started watching me. It started small. She'd ask where I parked. She'd comment on how I seemed fine when I walked into the office. She'd make little jokes about my cane being a prop. I brushed it off. But one afternoon, I was leaving work early because my pain level was at an 8. I could barely stand. I used my cane to hobble to my car, and as I got in, I noticed Casey standing by the entrance, her phone pointed at me. I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was texting. But the next day, Amy called me into her office and closed the door. "I need to talk to you about something," she said. "Casey came to me yesterday and said she has video evidence that you're not actually disabled. She says she filmed you walking perfectly fine outside of work." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Amy pulled up a video on her phone. It was me, on a Sunday afternoon, walking out of a grocery store. I was carrying a bag of groceries in one hand and I was walking normally. No cane, no limp, because it was a good day, a rare good day where my pain was at a 4 and I could function like a regular person. "She's been following me," I said, my voice shaking. Amy looked uncomfortable. "She said she happened to see you and decided to record. She claims she's done it multiple times and has several videos showing you walking without any assistance." I felt sick. Amy, I have a diagnosed medical condition. I have paperwork filed with HR. I have a handicapped placard. I use a cane when I need to. Just because I have good days doesn't mean I'm faking. Amy nodded. I believe you, but Casey has taken this to HR. They're going to want to review your medical records and the videos. I'm sorry, but I have to follow procedure. The next few weeks were a nightmare. HR requested my medical records. They interviewed my doctor. They watched the videos Casey had taken. There were 8 of them spanning 3 weeks. She had followed me to the grocery store, to the park, to my sister's house. She had filmed me from a distance. She had even filmed me getting out of my car at my own apartment complex. I felt violated. I felt like I was being punished for not being visibly sick every single second of my life. I started having anxiety attacks. I couldn't sleep. I went to my doctor and she wrote a letter explaining the nature of my condition, that it fluctuates, that it's normal for someone with fibromyalgia to have good days and bad days. HR eventually cleared me. They said the videos were not proof of anything and that my medical documentation was sufficient. Casey was told to stop. But she didn't. 2 weeks later, she filmed me again. This time, she posted the video on a private Facebook group for disability fraud awareness. Someone in the group recognized me and sent me the link. In the video, I was at a farmer's market laughing with a friend carrying a bag of apples. The caption read, "This woman claims she's disabled and uses handicapped parking, yet here she is walking and carrying heavy groceries like a normal person." Think about that next time you see someone with a placard. I called the police. They said it was a civil matter. I called a lawyer. She said I might have a case for harassment and invasion of privacy, but it would be expensive and time-consuming. I wanted to pursue it, but then Casey's behavior escalated. She started telling other coworkers that I was a fraud. She told them that HR had only cleared me because I was buddies with Amy. She said I was taking resources away from real disabled people. A few people stopped talking to me. One woman in accounting asked me directly, "So are you actually disabled or not? Because I have a cousin with MS and she can barely walk. It doesn't seem fair." I wanted to scream. I wanted to show them my medical records. I wanted to take them through a day of my life when the pain is so bad that I can't get out of bed, but I shouldn't have to. The whole point of an invisible disability is that you can't see it. That doesn't mean it's not real. Then came the final straw. I had a bad flare-up and used my handicapped placard to park close to the office. When I came out at the end of the day, there was a note on my windshield. It was printed on a piece of paper, no signature. It said, "We know you're faking. The real disabled people are watching." I broke down right there in the parking lot. I took a photo of the note and sent it to Amy. She called a meeting with HR and presented the note and the Facebook video. This time they took it seriously. Casey was suspended pending investigation, but she wasn't fired. She came back after 2 weeks with a written warning, and she started doing it again, only smarter. She stopped filming me at work, but I started seeing her car in my neighborhood, my sister's neighborhood, outside the grocery store at the same time I usually shop. I don't know what she wants. Maybe she thinks if she can prove I'm faking, she'll get the promotion. Maybe she just hates the idea of someone getting accommodations she thinks they don't deserve. Or maybe she's just a miserable person who needs to tear others down to feel better about herself. I'm not quitting, I'm not letting her win, but I carry a small camera with me now and I record every time I see her. I've logged dates, times, locations. I've filed a restraining order. The court hearing is in 2 weeks. I don't know if it will stop her, but I'm done being a target. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to do my job and live my life. But some people see a person getting a little help and they lose their minds. They think you're cheating the system, getting away with something. They don't see the nights you spend crying because your own body feels like it's on fire. They don't see the mornings you have to brace yourself just to sit up in bed. I'm still going to work. I still park in the handicapped spot on bad days. And if Casey shows up anywhere near my car again, I've got the footage. The court will see it. Maybe then she'll finally understand that invisible doesn't mean imaginary. But that whole mess made me think about how people twist things to hurt you. How jealousy and resentment can turn someone into a stalker, a liar, a monster. And it reminded me of another story, one that started with a proposal and ended with a family ban. This one came from a woman whose sister-in-law had dated her fiance years before, and she never got over it. Let me set the scene. My name is not important, but you can call me Op. I was 27, engaged to a man named George who was 38. My older brother David was married to a woman named Ella who was 34. On paper, it sounds like a normal family. But underneath the surface, there was a history I didn't know about until it was too late. 4 years ago, George briefly dated Ella. It lasted about 6 months. Ella wanted to get married and have kids, but George was not in that place. He was partying, doing drugs, and generally being unreliable. Their breakup was dramatic. Ella was furious that she couldn't make him settle down. She wanted a ring, a house, a baby. George wanted to keep drinking and disappearing for weekends. Right after they broke up, Ella met my brother David. And I mean right after. She was with George in March, broke up in April, met David in May. By September, they were engaged and they got married that November. So in the span of about a year and a couple of months, Ella went from dating her ex to being married to his older brother. I know it sounds insane, but that's what happened. I didn't know any of this when I met George. That was 2 years ago at a friend's barbecue. He was funny, charming, and he seemed really together. We hit it off immediately. He told me he'd been sober for a year, that he'd cleaned up his life, that he was in therapy. I didn't care about his past, everyone has one. What mattered was the person he was becoming, and he was serious about me. He quit drinking completely before we even had our first date. He went to therapy twice a week. He started eating better, sleeping better, working out. He became the best version of himself, and I was proud to be part of that journey. We got engaged 6 months ago. It was perfect. He took me to the same park where we had our first kiss, got down on one knee, and asked me to spend the rest of my life with him. I said yes, I was glowing. Then Ella found out. I don't know exactly when she learned that George and I were together, but it must have been around the same time we got engaged, because the next week she showed up at my parents' house unannounced. My mom called me confused. Ella is here and she's crying. She says you're dating a man who abused her. Is that true? I felt my stomach drop. What? No, who is she talking about? George, my mom said. She says he was her boyfriend before she met David. She says he was violent and controlling and she's scared for you. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just sat there trying to process. I knew George had dated someone before, but he never told me it was my brother's wife. And I knew he had a rough past, but he'd never been violent. He was the gentlest man I'd ever been with. I drove straight to my parents' house. Ella was sitting in the living room pretending to wipe tears. My mom and dad were on the couch looking worried. David wasn't there, he was at work. Ella, I said, what are you talking about? George is not abusive, he's never even raised his voice at me. She shook her head, her voice trembling. You don't know him like I do. He was mean, selfish, he did drugs. He tried to get me to do them too. He left bruises on my arm once when he got mad. I stared at her. When did this happen? You and George dated for 6 months 4 years ago, and then you married my brother. Why are you bringing this up now? She didn't answer. She just kept crying and saying she couldn't believe I would date her ex. My mom looked at me. Is it true they dated? I nodded. I just found out today. George never told me it was Ella. He just said he had a short relationship with someone who wanted more than he could give. Mom turned to Ella. Why didn't you tell us when you first met your husband's sister? Ella's crying turned into anger. Because I didn't think she would go after my leftovers, but she did. She hunted him down and stole him, and now he's clean and successful and proposing to her. It's not fair. I made him into a better man. I left him and then he got better for someone else. That was when everything changed. The fake tears stopped. She was just bitter. 4 years later, still bitter that she couldn't make George settle down, so she had to watch him become the man she wanted him to be for me. Over the next few weeks, she escalated. She told our entire extended family that George was grooming me because of the age gap. I was 25 when we started dating, he was 36. She said I was being manipulated into becoming an addict like him. She called my workplace and left anonymous voicemails saying I was dating a criminal. She even told David that George had physically assaulted her. David didn't believe it. He knew George from before, knew he had cleaned up. He confronted Ella and she broke down and admitted she made it up. But she didn't apologize to me. She said I deserved it for taking what was hers. That was the final straw. My brother told her she was no longer welcome at any family events until she got therapy and apologized. She screamed, she cried, she called him controlling. But David stood firm. He said, you lied about my sister being abused. You tried to destroy her relationship. You don't get to be part of this family anymore. It's been 3 months. Ella hasn't apologized. She's been posting passive-aggressive things on social media about how families should stick together, how David is brainwashed, how I'm the villain. But I don't care. I have George, I have my brother, and I have a wedding to plan. Ella used to call me a homewrecker. But the only thing I wrecked was her fantasy that she could control everyone around her. Sometimes I still wonder if I should have handled it differently. But then I remember the look in her eyes when she realized her lies weren't working. And I know I did the right thing. That's the thing about people like Ella and Casey, they don't see you as a person. They see you as an obstacle, a threat, a target. And when you don't fall for their games, they can't handle it. I'm not the one who lost anything here. They did. That whole mess with Ella reminded me that some people don't care about the truth, they just care about winning. And I've seen that kind of obsession up close before, not with a sister-in-law, but with a coworker who couldn't stand the idea that I had accommodations she didn't think I deserved. Let me back up. I'm a woman in my late 20s. I have a condition called chronic pain. It's not something you can see from the outside, but it's there every single day. I explain it like this: if pain is a scale from 1 to 10, most people walk around at a 1 or 2. I'm at a 6 minimum. Imagine the ache you get after pulling a muscle, but it never goes away. Some days it spikes higher, and on those days I use a cane. I also have a handicapped placard for my car, because when I'm at a 7 or above, walking from the far end of a parking lot is not just painful, it's impossible. I work 2 jobs. My full-time gig is one thing, but my part-time job is at a small office where I'm an assistant coordinator. My boss, Amy, is great. She's understanding, she's fair, and she's never questioned my need for accommodations. The team is small: me, Amy, and a woman named Casey. Casey and I both report to Amy. We get along okay, but there's always been an undercurrent of tension. Casey wants a promotion. She's been gunning for a full-time position for years. Me, I don't want it. I already have a full-time job. I do this one because it pads my savings and keeps me busy, which helps with my anxiety. I've never been a threat to her advancement, but Casey didn't see it that way. She saw my accommodations as proof that I was gaming the system. She'd make little comments: you don't look like you're in pain. Why do you get to park so close when I have to walk? Must be nice to have a doctor who writes you a note for anything. I ignored it. I figured she was just frustrated with her own career, but then things escalated. It started about 3 months ago. I had a bad pain day, one of those days where my hips felt like they were grinding glass. I used my cane and parked in the handicapped spot. When I got inside, Casey was already at her desk. She looked at me, then out the window at my car, then back at me. She didn't say anything, but she was smiling. That smile made my skin crawl. The next week I found out why. Amy called me into her office. She looked uncomfortable. She said, "I need to tell you something and I want you to stay calm." Then she showed me her phone. Casey had sent her a video. It was me 3 days earlier at a grocery store. I was walking without my cane, carrying a bag of groceries. I looked fine, no grimacing, no limping. It was maybe 10 seconds long. The caption read, "Look who's not disabled today." My stomach turned. I said, "She filmed me." "Without my permission, outside of work," Amy nodded. "She claims she's just trying to prove that you're faking it for the handicapped placard. She said she's been watching you for weeks. She has more videos." I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just sat there thinking about how many times I'd been followed without knowing. How many times she'd hidden in her car or around a corner waiting for me to have a good day so she could catch me. Because that's the thing about chronic pain, it fluctuates. A good day doesn't mean I'm not disabled. It means I'm having a good day. But Casey didn't care about the truth. She cared about winning. I went to HR. I filed a formal complaint. I also filed a police report for stalking because following someone and filming them without consent, that's not just workplace harassment, that's illegal. The police were lukewarm. The officer I spoke to said, "Ma'am, are you sure this isn't just a coworker dispute? We have limited resources." I told him I had evidence. I had the video forwarded to me by my boss. I had dates and times. I had witnesses who'd seen Casey sitting in her car in the parking lot of my apartment complex. Because I'd started noticing her there after I confronted her, she was watching my home. The officer took my report but told me not to expect much. He said, "We'll talk to her, but without physical threats, it's hard to charge her." I felt like I was being gaslit, like I was the one overreacting, but I knew I was, so I took matters into my own hands. I bought a dash cam that records front and back. I started parking in different spots, varying my schedule. I told my building security to keep an eye out for her car. At work, things got tense. Casey was put on a performance improvement plan, but she wasn't fired. HR said they needed to investigate further. Meanwhile, she kept showing up. She'd glare at me from her desk. She'd whisper to other coworkers. She started spreading rumors that I was faking a disability for attention. One of my coworkers, a nice woman named Maria, told me that Casey had said, "If she really has chronic pain, why does she go to the gym?" Because I do go to the gym on good days. Light exercise helps. But Casey twisted that too. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. I was leaving work, walking to my car. It was a good day. I wasn't using my cane. I had my keys in my hand. As I approached my car, I saw Casey's phone pointed at me. She was standing by her own car 2 spaces away, recording. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my own phone and started recording her. I said, "You're being recorded. Stop filming me right now." She lowered her phone but didn't stop. She said, "I'm just gathering evidence. You're going to trip up eventually." I said, "I don't have to trip up. My disability is real. You're the one breaking the law." She laughed. "Good luck proving that." I went straight to Amy and showed her the video of Casey filming me. Amy's face went pale. She said, "I'm sorry. I should have handled this sooner." She called HR again. She called corporate. She demanded action. This time something happened. Casey was suspended pending investigation. I found out later that she'd been posting the videos online in a private group dedicated to catching disability fraud. She was bragging about exposing me. The group had hundreds of members. They were sharing tips on how to stalk disabled people. It was sick. The investigation took 2 weeks. At the end, Casey was fired. Not just fired, she was also charged with stalking. The police finally took it seriously when I showed them the online group. They subpoenaed her phone and found dozens of videos of me, plus GPS data showing she defollowed me to the gym, to the grocery store, to my apartment. She's now facing a trial. I have a restraining order. I still work at that office, but I'm still scared. I check my mirrors when I drive. I look over my shoulder when I walk. The feeling of being watched doesn't go away just because the stalker is gone. But I also feel vindicated. I didn't back down. I didn't let her bully me into hiding my disability. I go to work on good days and bad days. I park in the handicapped spot when I need to. And if anyone else tries to film me, they'll have to deal with my camera and my lawyer. The lesson I learned from both of these experiences is the same. People will lie to destroy you. They'll twist reality, film you secretly, call you a fraud, call you a homewrecker. But the truth has a way of surfacing. It might take time. It might take a restraining order and a criminal trial. But eventually the bitterness eats them alive and you're still standing. I'm still standing. And I'm not going anywhere. I never thought my own sister-in-law would try to destroy my reputation just because her ex-boyfriend fell in love with me. But here we are. Let me back up. I'm 27, female. My fiance is George, he's 38. My older brother is David, 35. And my sister-in-law David's wife is Ella, 34. Sounds simple enough, right? Except that 4 years ago, George and Ella dated briefly. And when I say briefly, I mean 6 months. 6 months of drama, partying, and a whole lot of George not being ready to settle down. Ella wanted marriage and kids. George was deep into his issues back then, drinking, drugs, unreliable. He wasn't the guy anyone would want to lock down. So they broke up. It ended badly. Ella was furious that she couldn't make him commit. Then within a year of that breakup, Ella met my brother David. And I'm not exaggerating, they got married 6 or 7 months after they started dating. The whole timeline is insane. She dated her ex, broke up, met my brother, married him, all within about a year and a couple of months. I didn't know any of this back then because I met George 2 years ago when Ella was already David's wife. I had no idea they had a history. When George and I started getting close, something shifted in him. He quit drinking cold turkey. He stopped the drugs. He started going to therapy. He became a completely different person, stable, present, intentional. He told me later that he did it because he wanted to be worthy of a real relationship. He wanted to change for himself, but meeting me was the catalyst. I've been with him through his entire healing journey, and I'm proud of him. We have a healthy, amazing relationship. No screaming fights, no trust issues, just two people who actually communicate. But Ella, she lost her mind when she found out I was dating George. And I mean completely unhinged. She started spreading lies. She told everyone that George was grooming me because I was 25 and he was 36. Newsflash, that's not grooming. I was a grown adult. She also lied that he was abusing me, that he was trying to turn me into an addict like he used to be. She told my parents that I was being manipulated, that I was in danger. She said it with such conviction that my mom actually called me in tears, begging me to leave him. I had to show my mom George's therapy receipts, his sobriety tracker, his blood tests proving he was clean. It was humiliating. I felt like I was defending myself against a criminal accusation when all I'd done was fall in love with a man who turned his life around. The worst part, Ella was still married to my brother David. She was living in their house playing happy wife while simultaneously trying to destroy my relationship. David didn't know about the lies at first. He was just confused why everyone in the family was suddenly so hostile toward George. When I finally told him everything, the grooming accusations, the abuse claims, the addiction fear-mongering, he didn't believe me. He said, Ella wouldn't do that. She's just worried about you. That stung. But I knew I had to prove it. I started keeping records, screenshots of texts, recordings of phone calls where she ranted about George, witnesses who'd heard her badmouth me at family gatherings. I built a file. It took months. Meanwhile, George and I got engaged. He proposed at a quiet dinner, just the two of us with a simple ring. I said yes. We were happy. Ella found out through social media. She called David screaming, then she called me. I still remember her voice, high and trembling with rage. You stole my life. You stole the man who was supposed to be mine, and now you're flaunting it? I said, Ella, you're married to my brother. You have your own life. Why does this bother you so much? She didn't answer. She just hung up. The next day, she posted on Facebook a long, rambling post accusing George of being a drug addict, a predator, a liar. She tagged my parents, my aunts, my cousins. She made it public. She called him a danger to women and said I was brainwashed. That's when David finally saw it. He called me furious, not at me, at her. He said, I didn't know she was doing this. I'm so sorry. I sent him my file. All the evidence I'd been collecting. He read it and then he had a conversation with Ella. I don't know exactly what was said, but I know it ended with her crying and him telling her she needed help. He gave her an ultimatum, go to therapy and apologize to George and me or leave. She refused. She said she was the victim. She said George had ruined her chance at happiness and that I was a homewrecker. David packed her bags. He told her she was banned from all family events until she got professional help. My parents backed him up. My cousins, my aunts, everyone, they saw the evidence and they cut her off. Ella tried to fight it. She called my mom crying, said she was being abandoned. She texted me saying I'd destroyed her marriage. But I didn't destroy anything. She did that all by herself. The last I heard, she's living with her parents, going to therapy and trying to get David to take her back. He says no. He's filing for divorce. And me, I'm planning a wedding. George is sober, happy, and the love of my life. We don't talk about Ella anymore. She doesn't deserve our energy. Sometimes family is the one who hurts you the most. But the truth always comes out. You just have to be patient and keep the receipts. I'll start with a natural transition from the current ending. That was the end of the family drama, but the fallout with Ella kept going long after David kicked her out. I didn't realize how deep her bitterness ran until she started calling me at all hours from different numbers. She'd leave voicemails crying, then screaming, then begging. One night she said, you don't understand, I loved him first. He was supposed to change for me. Why did he change for you? I didn't answer. I saved the voicemails and sent them to David. He played them for his lawyer. The divorce was moving forward fast, but Ella was fighting it. She hired her own lawyer and started dragging George's name through the mud in a formal response. She claimed that George had been abusive to her during their 6-month relationship, something she'd never mentioned before. She said he'd pressured her into drugs, that he'd hit her. None of it was true. George had witnesses, text records, even a police report from a noise complaint that proved they weren't even living together then. But the accusation alone was enough to set my mom off again. My mom called me crying. I don't know who to believe anymore. I said, Mom, she's lying, she's desperate, she's trying to destroy George because she can't stand that he's happy with someone else. My mom paused, then she said, but if there's any truth to it, there is. I had to send my mom screenshots of the old police report and a signed affidavit from George's therapist confirming he'd been sober and in treatment for over 2 years before we started dating. It was exhausting. I felt like I was proving my own innocence over and over again. Meanwhile, my brother David was a wreck. He loved Ella. He thought they had a future. But when he saw the evidence of her lies, the Facebook posts, the voicemails, the accusations, he realized she'd been manipulating him the whole time. He told me she was so good at pretending. I thought she was genuine. I said she was genuine about wanting George. She never let that go. David went silent. Then he said I should have seen it. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Ella got some of the furniture and a small settlement, but David kept the house and the dog. She moved back to her parents' place 2 towns over. Last I heard, she's still in therapy, but she hasn't reached out to apologize. Not to me, not to George, not to David. She just posts vague quotes on social media about being a survivor and moving on. I don't care anymore. I'm marrying George in 6 months. We've got the venue, the dress, the rings. My mom is finally supportive. She even hugged George at the last family dinner. My dad still gives him a side-eye, but he's thawing. It takes time. The last bit of drama came when Ella's mother called my mom, begging her to let Ella back into the family. My mom said, not until she apologizes and gets real help. That call ended with screaming. My mom hung up and blocked her number. I think that's the real lesson. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you are the ones who hurt you most. But you don't have to let them stay in your life. You can choose your family. I chose George. I chose David. And I chose to cut out the poison. The coworker story didn't end with Casey's firing either. She appealed the termination, but HR backed me up. They had all the evidence, the screenshots, the video, the online group. Casey tried to claim she was just curious about my condition, that she thought I was faking because I seemed fine sometimes. But the judge in the stalking case didn't buy it. He saw the GPS data, the hours of footage, the comments she wrote in the private group calling me a fraud and a waste of resources. Her trial is still ongoing, but the preliminary hearings were brutal. I had to testify. I sat in that courtroom and described every time I saw her lurking in the grocery aisle, every time my phone buzzed with a text from a fake number, every time I felt that chill down my spine when I parked my car. The prosecutor showed the jury photos of my handicap placard, my doctor's notes, my medical records. Casey's lawyer tried to argue that I was exaggerating my disability, that I could have just ignored her. I looked right at the jury and said, I can't ignore someone who's following me home. I can't ignore someone who's filming me while I'm in pain. I have a right to live my life without being a target. One of the jurors nodded. Another one looked away. The trial is set for a verdict in a few weeks. I'm nervous, but I'm not scared anymore. I know the truth. And I know that whatever happens, I'll keep living my life. I'll keep going to the gym on my good days. I'll keep using my cane on my bad days. And I'll keep parking in the handicap spot because I don't need to prove anything to anyone. I already proved it to myself. But that wasn't the end. The trial verdict came in a few weeks later, and I honestly thought I was overreacting when the prosecutor called me to say they were recommending a plea deal. Casey's lawyer had tried to paint me as overly sensitive, as someone who misinterpreted her coworker's concern, but the jury didn't buy it. They saw the GPS data, the hours of footage, the private group chat where she called me a fraud and a welfare queen. They heard my testimony about the day I found her in the parking lot of my gym, phone out, pretending to be on a call as I limped to my car. The judge sentenced her to 2 years of probation, a restraining order, and mandatory sensitivity training. I sat in the front row, my hands shaking, and listened to her apologize. She said she was sorry for any distress she caused. She didn't look at me when she said it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just nodded at the prosecutor and walked out. But the fallout didn't stop. My manager, Amy, called me the next day to let me know that Casey had been fired from a previous job for similar behavior. She'd followed a disabled coworker around a grocery store and posted photos online. That employer didn't press charges, but they blacklisted her. Now it was public record. My part-time job became a nightmare for a while. Some coworkers who were friends with Casey gave me cold shoulders. One of them actually said, you could have just talked to her. You didn't have to ruin her life. I said, she ruined her own life. I just told the truth. That person quit a month later. I don't know where she ended up. The hardest part was my family. My mom called me after the verdict. She'd been worried the whole time, but she never really understood why I was so scared. She said, honey, it's just a coworker. Why didn't you just change jobs? I took a deep breath. Mom, she was stalking me. She followed me home. She filmed me while I was in pain. I shouldn't have to hide my disability to feel safe. She didn't answer for a long time. Finally, she said, I'm sorry, I didn't get it. I get it now. That was the first time I felt like she truly believed me. Now, a few months later, I'm still at the same job. Amy promoted me to full-time assistant coordinator. She said my handling of the situation showed resilience and professionalism. I accepted, but only after I made sure my disability accommodations were written into the contract. I still use my cane on bad days. I still park in the handicap spot. And I still get the occasional weird look from someone who saw the news story about the case. But I don't let it get to me. I know who I am. I know my pain is real. And I know that no matter how many times someone tries to prove otherwise, the truth is the one thing they can never take away from me.